Elisabeth Hasselbeck and Whoopi Goldberg, in the midst of their little fighting back and forth on The View, had it, I don't know if it's accidentally or if it's on purpose, but had an interesting conversation that I think we need to talk about further. At the end, Elisabeth Hasselbeck tears up and starts to cry a little bit. That's what everybody's focusing on, but don't worry about that. Let's actually listen to what they're saying. Here it is.
My thing is that we don't live in different worlds. We live in the same world.
We do live in different worlds. I'm sorry.
Oh, you know
I'm
what?
sorry. It's the way it is, Elizabeth. This is the way it is.
This
is how I grew up. My mother could not go and vote in the United States of America, the place of her birth.
We
Yes, we would like to. But you don't understand I want you to. But what I need you to understand is the frustration that goes along with when you say we live in the same world. It isn't balanced, and we would like it to be, but you have to understand, you have to listen to the fact that we're telling you there are issues, there are huge problems that still affect us. And you've got to know this if you want to know us.
I understand that. I'm not
but it
trying
didn't
to
sound like it.
I am not trying to take that away from you. When we are living in this world, and we are living in a world where there is, in the pop culture, when that world is then used, when there this is upsetting to me, because...
Okay, just take a breath and let someone else talk.
But this is a conversation that is hard, and we're going to have it here, and we have it here well, because we love each other.
Yes.
When we live in a world where pop culture then uses that term, and we're trying to get to a place where we feel like we're in the same place, and we feel like we're in the same world, how are we supposed to then move forward if we keep using terms that bring back that pain?
I can tell you, here's how we do it. You listen and say, okay, this is how we're using this word, and this is why we do it. You have to say, well, you know what? I understand that, but let's find a new way to move forward. You must acknowledge the understanding of what it is and why it is
in order to go. Take the time to have the conversation.
We are.
Okay, one second. Let somebody else have a conversation for just 1 second.
You know, I think they stumbled upon a pretty profound conversation. I really do. And I think they touched on the two keys to that conversation. Now, earlier in the show, Whoopi Goldberg was throwing the N-word around a lot, right? And they were talking about how Jesse Jackson had used it when talking about Obama. Now, Jackson didn't call Obama the N-word, but he used it in a sentence when talking about Obama in general, right? And he said, what was it? Obama is talking down the ends or something along those lines. Anyway, ends. God, we're such goofy. We're so goofy. But what can we do? We got to live in this world, as Whoopi tells us. So Elisabeth Hasselbeck was saying, hey, listen, Whoopi, how am I going to tell my kids not to use the N-word when you're using it, right? And rap language uses it, and we're all in the same world. I mean, it's not like I'm on Mars and you're on Venus. I see you using it. My kids see you using it. My kids hear the albums, and how am I supposed to teach them it's a bad word? I think Elisabeth Hasselbeck, believe it or not, has a perfectly legitimate point. I really do. Now, the other side is Whoopi Goldberg saying, hey, but we don't live in the same world. You keep wanting to apply your standard to us, right? But that's not how we grew up. That wasn't how it was. Now you just kind of magically want to say, okay, we're all in the same world, now you all react the same way. But the reason we're reacting differently is because we grew up in a different world. In the world that my mom grew up in, as Whoopi said there, was a world where she couldn't even vote, even though she was born in America, right? So how do we resolve this? Because I think they're both right, right? And I think how you resolve it is, first, America needs to acknowledge what Whoopi Goldberg is saying. That's a funny sentence right there, okay? But they do. They need to acknowledge, hey, you know what? Blacks come at this from a different perspective in America because they had a different perspective. And the perspective they had was not a pleasant one. It was one of oppression, repression, suppression, and for Christ's sake, I mean, we got the civil rights movement, and they barely begun to get equality in the 1960s. That wasn't that long ago. That was only 40 years ago, right? And a lot of those people are still alive. A lot of the same people who hose people down in the streets are still alive. And that legacy continues for a long time. And what Whoopi is saying there, and what Elisabeth Hasselbeck needs to hear, and what white America needs to hear is, just acknowledge that. We're not asking for a lot. We're just asking you acknowledge it first and go, oh, I get it. I get that everybody didn't live up in a happy, cheery world that I grew up in and my parents grew up in, and that you had a different perspective. And then once you recognize that, then I think, the African American community can take a step towards Elisabeth Hasselbeck's point of view and say, okay, now that you acknowledge that and we come at it from different perspectives, let's try to find a common perspective. And if you say, hey, in that common perspective, let's both stop using the N-word, and because we all live next to each other and it corrupts, our kids the same, then yes, of course I can get behind it. I think that makes sense. And then we can begin to have a lot of things that we can work together on, as long as we have the right understanding of where we both came from.